met me at one of the other Year 8 events this year, my name is Lauren Kia and I'm the Year 8 coordinator for this year. We're going to start with a prayer this evening. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. As we begin our meeting this evening, we ask the Lord to help us. We need help to calm the worries of the day and bring ourselves just to this moment.
In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus teaches us, "You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and gives light to all in the house. In the same way, we let our light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven."
Lord, send your Spirit upon us as we meet, talk, and discuss. We ask that all we do, dream, and hope for becomes your plan for us.
As we listen tonight and make our decisions about our studies, may we remember our gifts, our many gifts, and choose wisely so that we can use these gifts in praise of God for his greater glory.
Saint Marcel and Champagne, Mary our good mother, and may we always remember, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. I would now like to introduce Mr. Miller for his headmaster's address.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight, and thank you for coming out on such a night as it is. When I came down earlier tonight, I remembered back to the Year 8 etiquette evening, and I know those ladies who were here looked beautiful in the overcoats, and I think I said to you that night, I'd been in Canberra that day and I left it in the hands of the deputy. I've sent the deputy to Brisbane, so therefore it is a much warmer night in here tonight. I just hope it's not too hot for you. We're still trying to work out the temperatures on it, but it is a much better night to be here, and I know it's very cold outside, so thank you for getting here, and also thanks for being here on time as well. Just about tonight, as you know, you start Year 7, you do 8 subjects, you go into Year 8, you do the 9th subject, picking up the Italian for us as the language. Once you go to Year 9 though, this is where you start that journey, where you start selecting subjects. This time you get to choose 2 subjects. When you go to Year 11, you've got to do Catholic studies or studies of religion, and you've got to do English. After that, it's an open book and you get to choose everything. But tonight is the first step on that journey. And what I'd be saying to you, particularly gentlemen, is the fact that you don't choose subjects where your friends are going. You don't choose subjects based on who you think the teacher's going to be. You really need to pick a subject where you're going to be motivated, something you're interested in, because if you pick something you're not interested in, it's going to be very hard for you because you'll lose interest in it very quickly. We really have to talk about this seriously before you start those subjects, because as you move ahead next year, we're not going to keep changing subjects. So if you're doing it for a week and you decide, no, this is not the subject, we need to go back and change it, it's not that easy to do those sort of things. So you need to talk to the people who are here tonight, and if they're not here tonight, you need to follow them up tomorrow and over the next couple of days before those subject selection sheets are asked to be presented to us. The other thing I'll look at when we're looking at your subject selection will be your reports. When I look back on the reports you had this time, I would have sent out a number of letters to you, and there would have been only a couple of boys I've spoken to so far about their results, and I think I've only got one boy who comes up to me on a Monday afternoon, so that's fairly positive about Year 8. But we need to look at your attitudes, and the attitudes to me are everything, because if the attitudes are right, you'll get the marks and grades anyway. So when I'm looking at those attitudes, the 1, 2, 3, 4s, if you're one of those gentlemen there with some 3s in it and 4s, you need to very seriously think about those, because going into Year 9, they will use those also looking at Year 11 as well. But you've still got 6 months. You need to have a positive attitude by the end of the year if it's not going that well for you at the moment. So those attitude grades are important, and they will be part of this selection process when we're trying to work out what subjects we're going into. But it's a partnership between the staff, the parents and the students, We all need to talk together and work together as well. I'll leave you with that for the moment, and I'll talk again at the end. I'll let Mrs. Miller talk. Firstly, I'd just like to thank her for coming in tonight, though, because Mr. Graham's not here. He's ill. Normally he would have done this for you. But she's come back from Mittagong today, gone home and come back in, so I'm very appreciative of the fact she's done that. So I'll hand it over to Mrs. Miller, and she can take it from there.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight. I'll be speaking not only to our young men in the audience, but to parents as well, from the perspective of a teacher and a parent. My own daughter is in Year 8 this year, and only 2 weeks ago I attended a similar evening as a parent. And one of the things that I went in even as someone who supposedly knows what I'm talking about, as a parent, with different concerns and different expectations for my child. And it certainly wasn't a waste of a night for me, because it helped me start a conversation with my daughter. And that's probably one of the important things to work on from this point, is that conversation with your son about where he is heading to, what are his real interests, what are his real hopes and dreams. And lots of us have those conversations normally anyway, but it's good to take opportunities every time you can. So I'll kind of speak a little bit to that sense of being a parent through this journey as well. Sorry, everyone's got bad throats tonight. Don't know what it's like at your house, but at work here everyone's dropping like flies at the moment. So we, as you know, moving into Year 9 and 10, there are, as usual, those mandatory subjects that our students study. The list is up there. I'm an English teacher. I obviously rate English highly as one of those subjects that you carry with you throughout life. Even though students love to ask those questions, why the heck are we studying Shakespeare? What am I going to do with that later? But certainly our mandatory subjects are mandatory because of those core ideas that, that do follow us through life. And they're there to ensure that our students have that really firm grasp of the way the world works moving forward. Throughout years 9 and 10, careers education is integrated through what the students do in their subjects, and that is supplemented by our work experience program. Students certainly enjoy and get a lot of value out of that opportunity to engage in work experience, our careers forum, and a transition to work program, which different students will take up for different reasons, and others will be looking at that closer to the end of Year 12 perhaps. But certainly our careers advisor, Mrs. Dean, is always available to talk through those sorts of careers options with students. But probably like me, you're sitting there not overly keen to start discussing where your son will be in 10 years' time in his career. At the moment, we just want to get him through Year 9 and 10, I think. So we also, as part of our syllabuses, incorporate information technology skills through our subjects, our varied subjects. Now that's mandated that we do that, but I'm sure you're all aware of the growing need for our students to have a level of familiarity with information technologies that is actually not just based around playing computer games. although some people love some of the social aspects of that, and you may have picked up that some students are engaging very socially in information technology ways. But this is obviously of growing concern to our young men moving into the world of tomorrow. We know, hopefully by now everyone would be aware that the school certificate is a long past qualification, and as part of that we know that the school leaving age has been raised to 17. That poses challenges for schools and for families, but part of the thinking behind that is to make sure that we are sending our young men out into the world with some core skills that are going to help them participate effectively in the workforce and in life and be contributing members of our community. So what our young men will be working towards will be their record of school achievement. And you will hear teachers, we always get caught up in the shortened forms of things, and so you might hear people talk about the ROSA. This might be the only opportunity to hear that in full, that it's the record of school achievement. We keep on calling it the ROSA. And really it's about building students towards sort of this cumulative credential, a little bit different to that endpoint school certificate that a lot of us might be familiar with. So our students are working towards a credential in a cumulative way. They build towards it. And you can see that list up there of skills like leadership, debating, cultural contribution and other school involvement. I can't remember what university it was, but recently it was one of the marquee universities. It might have been University of New South Wales, now I'm thinking of it. But they put out this new structure for bringing students into universities, and one of the things that they are looking at is no longer the ATAR alone. They are looking for those other skills and attributes that they would like from students of the future, and also mimicking what the workplace is looking for nowadays. Those of you who have businesses of your own would probably really be keen to look for, you don't necessarily want people who know how to do particular things already, but certainly people who are willing to learn how to do new things. So the ROSA is one part, gaining your ROSA and the skills and qualities that we're building in our students towards achieving that credential are really important going forward for their employment, university and or future family life. So we have what's called a school-based assessment in all of our subjects. So this goes back again to that old school certificate idea where you once used to sit this test at the end. Now, though, our students, again, build over a period of time their credential based on assessments in school. So we grade by an A to E grade with the record of school achievement, or ROSA. And what that really means is, yeah, you know, at the end of it all, you walk out with this credential. I think, based on what I've said, you probably know, I think it's a pretty important credential to have. It marks to employers, for instance, your level of commitment, and as Mr. Miller said earlier, your attitude towards learning, towards work. And especially with the end of that external test, achievement on an ongoing basis, achievement to the level that that you are aiming for, is really important. Without that sort of endpoint test, you need to show it in an ongoing way, and that probably comes back again to that idea of attitude. So for parents' information, our students have already engaged in a number of processes for deciding which electives they will take up next year. They have had a number of pastoral care lessons where they have reviewed their results from semester 1 and reflected on areas of strength and areas of improvement. One of the ways that we can get our young people to be more realistic about their goals, to focus on goals that will really matter to them, is to go through that reflection process. And you probably do it at home anyway when you talk about how did you go, look at your report, that was fantastic, or jeepers, got a little bit of work to do here. That's part of reflection. So our students have done that in their pastoral care lessons as well. And what they've been asked to do is not to focus necessarily on those things that they're not so great at, we've all got those, but to focus on the things that they're interested in and the things that they're strongest in. Because that's obviously, if we want our kids to experience success, I don't think any of us want our kids to experience failure, although failure is a really strong learning tool. We want them to experience success. And so to do so, they need to really understand what their interests and strengths are. Keep your eye out for this. This part was not, I'm not entirely sure when this is going on, but the subject handbook, which will give you a little bit more information as well, it will be online in those areas, Sky Blue, Central, and on the college website. That will be, keep your eye out for that. That's either there or is going to pop up at any minute, especially since I'm saying it. Something will happen somewhere. So that will be another source of information for you. Our KLA coordinators have spoken to the students already as well. So our key learning area coordinators who look after those elective subjects have spoken to students, and they certainly don't speak to them as if they are trying to sell a subject, because you don't want to sell a subject to people who aren't really going to buy into it as much as you want. What they did was provided information that will hopefully help your sons make some informed decisions about the subjects that they might like to choose. Tonight we have a number of our KLA coordinators here to answer questions at the end if you would like to find more information. So they will be available at the end of the presentation tonight, and we'll put those subjects and names up at the end of the presentation for you. So basically what we're looking at is that our young men study 2 electives. From the list, the available list of electives, they need to make 4 preferences. They will, I'll talk more about how they're going to go about choosing those preferences, but the 3rd and 4th preferences will only be considered when we exhaust all other opportunities. There are a number of reasons that students won't be able to get their 1st and 2nd preferences, but Mr. Graham is very, very strong on trying to meet a large number of 1st and 2nd preferences for students. So 4 preferences though, so it's not as simple as what are your 2 favourite things that you want to do. We need to pick 4 just in case. Okay, just in case. And if Mr. Graham is unable to meet a 1st and 2nd preference, he will consult with students, teachers about that so that everyone is best informed. So students will have an opportunity to hear about other options that they may have. So there are those reasons insufficient numbers. Sometimes it's not practical to run a subject if only 2 or 3 people express that that is their first preference. And that's the reality. We therefore try to make sure for that student who doesn't get their first, we can fit in their second and third. But insufficient numbers is a reality sometimes. Sometimes subjects clash. So when we run a 5-period school day, it's possible that history and mandatory technology are run at the same time, they'll occur in the same period, and therefore it would not be possible for a student without one of those fantastic Harry Potter time turners to attend both of those subjects. But again, Mr. Graham certainly works hard to work that into an effective timetable that meets everybody's needs. Sometimes there are too many applicants. English is mandatory, so we don't get the opportunity to have applicants, but I reckon if it was an elective, everybody would be knocking down the door of English, and then maybe some people would have to miss out. But anyway, we're one of the fortunate ones, but sometimes too many people. It is important to note that changes are not possible from year 9 and 10. Okay, that the electives that you end up with are the ones that you follow through for 2 years of study. That's why the advice that Mr. Miller gave of choosing something that you are interested in is most important, because 2 years of pain is not something most of us would take lightly. All right, you've got it for 2 years. Make sure that it's something you're interested in. So certainly once the Year 9 course has started, there will be no changes. So that first bit of advice to choose your interests and talents is most important. I mentioned that my own daughter is in Year 8 this year, and I went to her subject selection evening, and you would think that an English teacher mother and a physics teacher father, you know, we would have our stuff together, and that girl, she was going to do the subjects that we wanted. And I actually learnt a lot from just watching her, and I wanted her to do an elective history. Maybe that was actually more about me. I would have loved the opportunity to have an elective history when I was at school. And she has ended up with, physics father, English mother, she's ended up with food technology and photography. And I was initially quite taken aback by that. I counselled against it at first. But what I've actually realised is that I'm going to have some fantastic photos to put on my Facebook page, and also I'm going to have some fantastic dinners cooked at night. So there's some real benefits to listening to the interests of our kids. Not only is it necessarily something that they're good at now or they're interested in now, but imagine the new worlds that might open up to them because they've kind of stepped outside what we might expect of them and gone for something that they really have an affinity for or that they've shown an interest in. So firstly, there's that idea of interest, and secondly, the idea of talent or aptitude at something. You know, we do have to be realistic, and there are certainly, I know the number of subjects that I am, I guess I'm capable of learning as a good learner, but part of the lack of interest thing would mean that I'm also not going to have a necessarily strong aptitude for that subject. But if we're talking about wanting our young people to have success, we want them to be interested in what they do, and we want them to have the opportunity to be successful. So certainly we've got to be a little bit realistic in that way. So choose something you enjoy and for which you have a talent. they're the big ideas to take away. And it is a challenge for us as parents to hand over that control to our young people. But I think there are many benefits to come from that when we have engaged learners in the classroom. Certainly fewer, diary stamps home, fewer issues getting people to do homework. Part of it is it's not so much about making it easier on ourselves, but certainly making our young people feel happier and more fulfilled in what they're doing. So certainly you've got to get as much information as you can about the electives that you choose. There is that information booklet to have a look at. We have some of our, as I said, KLA coordinators here tonight, but our students have ready access to our teachers during the school day anyway. And I guess if you're pretty game, you shouldn't have to be game. Our young people are generally wonderful to talk to here, but if you even know someone in year 9 or 10, ask them about the subjects that they're doing, ask them whether they enjoy them, ask them what type of work expectation are there, and figure out if that's something you want to be involved in. Going back to that idea of discussing, I indicated that it's great for our young people to go with their interests, but I guess advice to students though is that despite all evidence that you think there is to the contrary, your parents know heaps, right? My daughter, I can't even help her with English homework. She won't listen to me. What do I know? But and that's part of being young, but our parents are a wealth of wisdom and advice. So have that chat with your parents, guys. You can go to the Board of Studies website or the NESA, it's called NESA now, Education Standards site, and you can go onto that site and they provide information about assessments and syllabuses. And Mr. Graham put this one. This is a real blokey one, right? Be your own man, make your own choices, but I'm still not advocating all-out rebellion against your parents, right? But what that's getting to is what Mr. Miller said, and I think it's coming up on this slide. Here we go. It's exactly this reason. Do not choose the subject because you think your friends are doing it. I know that you've already, the young men here have already been spoken to. If there are 2 classes running of a subject, it's not necessarily the case that you'll get in the class with your mate. That's the first thing. The second thing is not to choose because you think you know who the teacher's going to be. We might pull a Swiftie. We might swap our teachers around a bit. We've got a lot of people with expertise in a lot of areas. Things change. So they are not good reasons to choose an elective that you are stuck with for 2 years. The best reason to choose, or reasons, are interest and ability. This is part of where we as parents worry. This is probably why we worry about this type of thing, and I think this information will hopefully alleviate some of that concern. That our the elective choices that you make in year 9 and 10 have no impact on the subjects that you can choose in year 11 and 12. So at the moment, for instance, I'm pretty happy that my daughter can still choose modern history in year 11. I've got 2 years to persuade her, and that's possible. What she does in 9 and 10, what your sons will do in year 9 and 10 won't impact on the year 11 and 12 choices, except for that up there talks about language. If you would like to do language continuous, then you need to have that basics in years 9 and 10. So what we do look at though, and again I think this goes back to that interest idea, when you choose your subjects in years 11 and 12, part of that decision-making process is looking at your commitment and attitude in years 9 and 10 towards the subjects that you chose then. So again, we want to make sure that we're doing subjects in 9 and 10 that we're going to love doing, that we're going to love achieving in or working hard in, because that impacts in that way on our choices in year 11 and 12, and certainly on access to higher level subjects. It's part of the conversation, it has to be. So the subject selection forms are to be submitted to Student Services by Wednesday the 12th of September. So that's our time frame. I guess it takes a while to have a bit of a discussion about it, but I'd look at that as sort of the last date that you want to be putting those forms in. And then within the first few weeks of term 4, students will be notified of what electives they've been given. So there are our choices of electives for next year. I don't know if that's too small for anybody to see. It's very hard for me. I forgot my glasses. But there's a pretty good range there. Think about your son's areas of interest, the things that he's really good at, and where does that slot in those subject choices? I know you've got that list anyway, so I'll move on. And I'm going to move on. Oh, great. Mr. Spencer is our Director of Boarding, and Mr. Spencer is going to talk about the boarding options available to students at St Greg's. Thank you very much for your attention this evening, and I do hope that this process is not one that is stressful for you, but one that will help you celebrate your son's strengths and abilities. Thank you, and thanks to Mr. Spencer. Sorry.
That's all right. Thanks, Louise. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, gentlemen, young gentlemen of the college. I feel like Mr. Miller saying that. Some boarding options. So you've heard from me before, probably when your boys started in year 7, and I guess a lot of people say, well, they'd like to see their boys just adjust to high school first, and we might think about it later. So that's why I'm here tonight, just to remind you that we have boarding over there. I have spare beds over there, and would love to put a boy in them. So if you're sick of them at home, please, we'll take care of them. But no, if they are getting to that stage where you're hearing about subject choices now and homework, and perhaps we're getting a bit more serious about things, and the idea of coming in, staying back at school, doing your sport, having your free time of an afternoon, but then getting stuck into study, having a dinner break, doing a bit more study, then having free time with all your mates, it's not a bad lifestyle. So it might be something you are seriously considering. Some people would ask why you would be boarding in the year 2018, because a lot of people do think it's an old-fashioned concept, but there's a lot of reasons why you would. This was from an article that was in the Sydney Morning Herald back in July. I'm not sure why we're going backwards, but oh, it's fun. So a lot of parents are working longer hours, obviously, and I'm sure a lot of you could relate to that. And it is a reason why some people do look at boarding. A bit more stability and structure there for your sons. Growing travel times for some families as well. I know we have an intake area here from all over sort of southwestern Sydney and down at Minnegong, down at Wollongong, so there might well be some of you that really would be considering that for those reasons. That increased demand for flexibility, those things I just talked about, sporting options and lots of running around, it does help with that. And the fact that we do offer more accommodating options these days, so you don't have to be stuck here 7 days a week. We've got full-time boarders who love being here 7 days a week, but other than that, the weekly boarders sometimes get the best of both worlds. A few nights to knuckle down with study, and then 4 nights a week to be at home if they want with family and enjoying that side of life. So it is a good balance for them. That extended and weekly option, just to explain that, so extended means coming in for the 3 nights, and weekly you're in for the 5 nights. Some of the benefits that this article outlined for boarding. Students obviously becoming more involved at school. More time for sleep, and this is something we genuinely have emphasised, especially in the senior boarding house. We've made a commitment there to allow those boys to have 9 hours sleep a night, which is, all the studies are suggesting that's what teenage boys should be having, and we've allowed for that. We do take the technology at night time, the phones and the laptops. It's not an argument with the boys. It might well be at home. I hear that from a lot of parents. It's not here. They just have to do it. And then that way we're guaranteeing, we can't guarantee they're going to sleep straight away, but they do, because it's not like a school camp. They get over it pretty quickly, and they just settle into that. So we know our seniors have got that option of getting 9 hours sleep a night, and the younger boys have longer. Obviously they become part of a strong community, extended friendship groups they might not have ever considered. And a lot of the boys, they mix through sport on Saturdays with rugby union and basketball in summer, things like that. But other than that, the boarders, they do stick together because they have lunch together down at the dining hall, and they eat in there at lunchtime and things like that. It's not an exclusive thing, it's just the way it's set up. And I'd love to see the potential for more mixing there with some of the boys as well. But what tends to happen with the weekly boarders is a lot of those connections are made, and they'll then go out and visit the country, and they'll find they'll have mates from all over country New South Wales, which is a great benefit for them. And likewise, the boarders from the country get to visit city homes every now and then as well, so that's a really good thing for them. Guaranteed study, minimum 1.5 hours, anywhere up to 2 hours depending on the year group. At 9s and 10s you're looking at about that long. And yeah, it might sound like a real challenge for you boys at home to be heading home of a night time and knuckling down and doing that. That discipline, it does take discipline, it's not impossible. But if you think that down the track, this year or next year, this could be something to be useful for you, well, that's what we do. And there's also tutoring available. So all of our staff in boarding, the majority of us are teachers. So we're there to help the boys, and we also get other boys that have done very well in their HSC to come back and do tutoring for the boys as well. And we cover just about all the subjects. The article went on and pointed out some of the key life skills learned in boarding. And these sort of things were highlighted even tonight in what Mr. Miller said and what Mrs. That sounds wrong too, Mrs. Miller said. Self-management, self-reliance, cooperation, tolerance, that is the side benefit of boarding. So living in a community, as you'd imagine, I'm sure you see at home the trials and tribulations of sibling rivalry and everything else, and it's just the same over there, but it's just there's more of them. But they do learn to get along, and they mature over time from year 7 through to year 12, and by year 11 and 12 the closeness there and the relationships those boys have formed is pretty special. So it's certainly something they can learn to get along with people that they've got completely different ways of looking at the world. So that's a great thing. I'll leave it there. I'll pass back to Ms. Keir. But yeah, if you did want to talk about boarding tonight, I'm obviously here for that reason. And I took a boy in recently, a boy joined weekly boarding, and he said, "Oh, this is the first time I've ever been over here." So if you just wanted to have a look at any stage, I'm happy to do a tour for parents and for boys. If you want to come and see me, I'm down the dining hall, most recess and lunches you can find me, and I'm happy to show you around any time you like if you just want to go and have a look and get a feel for it. So happy to talk tonight as well. Thank you.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing with the ANPC this year. So our motto this year was to do with our choices and our future. So how our choices are going to impact upon what our future is. So the aim there is to encourage the boys to make positive decisions, and that's just not in relation to what they're doing here at school. So that's in relation to at home, as well as in the classroom, in the playground, on the sporting fields, basically, every facet of their life. And part of what we're doing here at St Greg's is obviously trying to help these Year 8 boys turn into young gentlemen by the time they leave here at the end of Year 12. And part of that is about getting them to take responsibility for their actions, the consequences of their decisions, whether they be positive or negative consequences, and just helping them to grow to be the best that they can be. So some of the things that we've been working on and are going to continue to work on this year with Year 8 through our pastoral care program at the school, we've already looked at goal setting and evaluating ourselves. So we've done that by looking at doing a report review. So they've looked at their reports at the start of the year and set themselves some goals, and then obviously discuss those with their homeroom teachers. So they've had discussions with their homeroom teachers, and then they revisit their first semester reports, have a look back at that, and at the end of the year they'll review, at the start of next year they'll also do another review as well of their end of semester or end of year reports as well. We look at study skills, so leading up into the last lot of exams and also coming up into the next lot of exams, we do some online modules, and they're accessible at any point. So the boys have the access codes to that, so they're not just limited to what we're doing in our Year 8 PC lessons. They can also go and have a look at that as well, which leads into the next one, which is organisation. So not only are we trying to encourage them to use their time to study, but also to be organised as well, and that's something that their homeroom teachers would be working on with them on a daily basis. And some of the guys who I guess sometimes struggle with that a little bit more, they might come and get a little bit of assistance from me, and also sometimes there's opportunities for them with the learning support team as well. This year we've also looked at keeping safe, so some child protection type things, and looking at what makes a healthy relationship and how to identify if our relationships with our friends, family, whoever it might be, if they are positive or negative relationships, how to I guess respond if they're starting to realise that there are negative relationships, or if they have friends who might be in those situations, and I guess how they can help their friends get support for that as well. We also look at cyber safety, so particularly this year we were looking at things to do with social media and being safe online. Mr. Perner came in and did a session with the guys on that, and a lot of the feedback that I got from the boys about that was that they found it really informative, and they were quite positive about that. Obviously our mums know that we've been working on our manners and our etiquette this year, and so that was obviously put on show and put to the test at our Mums and Sons etiquette night just earlier this term, and we had a number of pastoral care lessons that were associated with that as well. We are also looking at mental health and well-being, so how we can look after ourselves and each other in terms of our mental health, and that might be taking some time out for ourselves, relaxation and breathing and meditation and how things like that and being thankful are things that can help with our mental health and well-being as well. So that's something that we're actually going to be looking at in one of our sessions that is coming up later in the year. We also look at bullying and resilience, as well as harassment and peer pressure. So the boys have seen a performance that we had earlier in the year called Stones, which was by Zeal Theatre, and it looked at a real life situation, I suppose, where there were some boys and they were throwing stones off an overpass, and what the consequences, I guess, of their actions were, and not just the consequences for themselves, but for their families, their friendships and things like that as well, and their mental health as well. So, and I guess that one particularly looked at peer pressure, and we're going to be having brainstorms coming soon, and they're going to be obviously talking about the bullying and harassment as well as resilience and how to deal with those situations. And then the last one I have up there is making the right choices, which is obviously, as I spoke about earlier, we have a theme of our choices, our future. So how making the right choices is extending into all of the things that we're doing. So whether that be our subject selection night, and that we're making the right choices for us based on our interests and our strengths, as opposed to what our friends are doing. Making the right choices about our friendships and our relationships with other people. Are we making positive choices in those relationships and making people feel good about themselves, or are we making people feel negative about themselves? Making the right choices in terms of our academic performance. So are we making the choice to be active in our classroom and active in our own learning? So there's some of the things that we're looking at in terms of making the right choices. Okay, so just some things that have been happening in Year 8 this year. So obviously just recently we've had our Mums and Sons Etiquette Evening, which was, I thought, a really nice night. Hopefully the mums did as well. I did have some feedback from some mums that were pretty happy about that night. They enjoyed themselves. It was nice to spend some time with their sons, as I'm sure the dads earlier in the year, when they had their kind of games activity day, got to spend some time with their sons there. And obviously at the moment we've been working towards subject selection. So as I mentioned, or as Mrs. Miller mentioned, sorry, we've had 2 PC lessons plus a little bit of an extra lesson where they have spoken with their homeroom teachers, reflected upon their own strengths, how they like to work, how they like to learn, and how that might inform what their choices are for next year. Also, as was mentioned, the KLA coordinators have come and spoken to the boys and basically presented the types of things that they will be learning in those subjects over the next 2 years, so that the boys have a little bit of an overview of what's on offer and what sort of things they might be doing and learning within those subjects. So if the boys were present on those 2 days, they might already have a fair idea based off those conversations on the types of things that they want to look at. And just coming up, so there's a couple of important dates coming up. So obviously on Monday we have our Mass for the Feast of St. Gregory. On the 7th of September, so that's next Friday, so not this Friday coming, the following one, we have our first photo day, and later next term we have the co-curricular awards evening on the 12th of November, and the academic awards evening on the 5th of December. So they're just some dates that you might want to keep in your diary, so that you're prepared for those ones as well. Just before I ask Mr. Miller to come back up, just to let you know the teachers that we have here tonight and what subjects they you can be talking to them about. So Mr. Harrison is here to talk about agriculture. Mr. O'Flynn, he's got a few subjects that he'll be talking about. So graphics and technology, so industrial technology, electronics, engineering, metals and timber. So any of those subjects, Mr. O'Flynn's your go-to guy for that. So he might have a bit of a line, so you might want to go and see some other people whilst you wait. Miss Curry is going to be talking about IST, so information software technology, as well as Italian and other external languages. Mr. Malone is here to talk about music. Mr. Bingham is here to talk about physical activity and sports studies, also known as PASS. And Ms. Ference is here to talk about visual arts and photography and digital media as well. So before you, after Mr. Miller has spoken to you, but before you go and speak to them, if you haven't picked up your subject selection forms, so they're those bright green forms, they're located over that side of the hall up the back on those desks. They are in homeroom groups in alphabetical order. So if you didn't grab those on your way in, because I know some people got here a little bit early, they might not have been out yet, or if you've come in a little bit late after Mr. Miller speaks, feel free to grab those as well. So I'll introduce Mr. Miller back up.
I'd just like to say thank you to the staff who have come in tonight. As I said, the KLA coordinators have come in, so that they're available for you to meet with. Also, our audio people up here in the top box as well, they've come in just to make sure these things work for us. But also, especially to Miss Keir and Miss Miller for being here tonight. As I said, Mr. Graham would normally be here to do this, but Mrs. Miller stepped in, so I was very appreciative of that. Just finally, gentlemen, to you, remember what we said tonight? It's about picking a subject you're interested in. Do not pick a subject your friends are doing. Do not pick a subject waiting on a teacher. And the last piece of information, those sheets have to be in on a certain date. For those parents who've got boys in year 10, you know there was a big panic today and yesterday because they were all due in and they were looking for signatures, and there were 50 down in the office trying to get signatures in 5 minutes. So let's get those sheets in well and truly in front of time. The other thing I noticed when Mr. Spencer said if you just want to get rid of the kids and then put them into boarding, the number of you who smiled, I'm sure you love your kids, but they're great day kids as well, okay? So let's go home with that idea anyway. But thanks very much and good night.